about, maybe they're going to drop the public option, because it has been sparking a public outcry of people that are pretty angry and upset. And what I kind of actually have in view, and actually this might actually come from living over in China for the past 4 years. In China, when you go to buy something in a market, you have to bargain for it. It's not like the U.S. where you just walk in and you automatically have a price tag, and that's the price you pay.
Sure.
You've got to bargain, and you get used to it after a while, but it always starts off the same way. The vendor, you either give a very low price, or what happens more often is the vendor gives you a very high price, and then you have to talk them down. Mm-hmm. And I view this kind of like we might end up the same way. Like the Democrats have come out with this plan. It's like there's been enough time for people to actually read most of the 1,000 pages, and it's pretty outrageous. It's shocking and outrageous, and it doesn't belong there.
Yeah, I got infuriated every page I read. I probably only read 20 or 30 pages, but it's just outrageous. I mean, I came across 3 different ways that Acorn, that corrupt organization, can plug into the government trough again.
Yeah, so my point is, like, you start off with something outrageous, and then what you end up settling for is you compromise. But in our case, what are we compromising between? We're just going to end up with a mildly weaker strain of socialized medicine. But as I point out on my website, I make an analogy between basically I call it the box of chocolates, and I go through like a little candy store analogy. But the outcome of that analogy is that it doesn't matter how socialized care starts. The end result will be the same. It may take a little bit a bit longer, but we'll end up in the same boat as if the Obamacare plan had been passed. So I guess my message is that folks out there, don't give up. And what you really need to go after is, decide for yourselves whether you favor privatized medicine or not. But if that's the way it is, you need to be very strongly for that, and keep speaking up and speaking out. Because and this is another thing that I've heard actually from a lot of Democrats that I've spoken to is they say, oh, the Republicans don't have a plan. But they do. And actually, the competitor, Congressman Charles Dent, in my area, he is actually a co-writer and a co-sponsor of a bill. I believe it's H.R. 2116, but that's coming from memory. And the bill is called like the Medical Rights and Reform Act or something like that. And they try to have a bunch of verbiage in there. This is for the patient. But at the bottom of it, it has quotes like, will foster state innovation in the healthcare system and develop high-risk pools and sponsor and give money from people that are rich to people that are poor to pay for their health care. And what is that? I mean, it's the same thing, just a scaled-down version of it as the Democrats' plan. And
well, that brings up, your whole argument there just brings up something I've been saying for years, that this socialism is a progressive degenerative disease of our social, moral, and economic fiber, and these incrementalists, these people who are compromising, really get my goat, because if an agency costs $100 billion this year, and the other side wants to raise it to 150, a compromise is not allowing it to go to 125 if that agency shouldn't even exist. A compromise would be taking that illegal, unconstitutional agency and whittling it down to 75 or 50. To let it go up, to let the budget increase is a sellout, not a compromise.
Yeah, and actually, I started off my healthcare platform announcement. I had a quote at the beginning of it, and there's a link to a book called The People's Pottage. And if you think about The People's Pottage, it's all about the rise of socialism in the U.S. And it's a free book that people can download. But the key thing about it is actually a series of essays written back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. 3 essays written by the same fellow. And what he really talked about was basically everything that happened with the monetary system, the fall of that, the start of Social Security. That was, to kind of, pay back, we stole all your gold, but, now we're going to take care of you when you get old. And it really spends a lot of time, actually, in the last part on, I think the last section is called Rise of Empire. And what people need to realize, and like I stand for the Republic, I stand for returning to a constitutional republic of checks and balances. But what we need to face up to is, the Republic is kind of dead. And it's been dead for quite some time. And what we really have is an empire. And the way it really started, you can't really pick a date, but if you had to pick a date, I would actually say it would be the Korean War. Because, we finished off World War II, which in my view was, we were attacked by the Japanese and was a just war, and the responses was justified. But after that, we had the Korean War. And say what you want about that engagement, but the fact of the matter is Congress did not declare war. And
nor have they since. We've been in how many wars? Probably, I'll bet you we've been in 50 to 75 wars since then, and we haven't declared a one of them.
Absolutely, and that is the key mainstay of a republic. Like, if you go back and study the Romans, they were actually able to keep things under wraps as a republic up until a certain point. We expanded as a republic. We expanded from the East Coast to the West Coast, attacking pretty much Indian tribes. But that was still actually done as a republic. And you can argue, whether that was good or bad, but we still had a Republican form of government back then. What we really have today is we have the government, we have one man or an oligarchy of them basically ruling things. I mean, look at where this health plan came from. Look at where the budgets come from. They all come from the White House. And what Congress is supposed to do is Congress is supposed to control the purse strings of government. And that is one of the key checks on the executive branch. The executive branch is not supposed to be doing all this stuff. They're just supposed to execute the laws and ensure that they're carried out.
Yeah, well, we seem to be having more and more a unitary presidency. The appointment of these czars, which don't even get approved by the Senate, like like cabinet positions would be.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, this was all pointed out in a book that F.A. Hayek wrote in 1945 called The Road to Serfdom. And in The Road to Serfdom, one of the things that he points out is that what you need to watch for in any socialist system is that the legislative body will spin off these responsibilities. And, because, number one, they can't decide. I mean, can you imagine Congress deciding, all of the environmental laws or all of the healthcare laws or all of the cap-and-trade laws? They really don't. I mean, they use lobbyists in some cases to write these, but in a lot of cases, they just create an agency, the EPA or the FDA or whatever, and say, you guys are in charge, or Homeland Security is a big one, and say, you guys get to go off and, run this thing and, spend the money and report back to us on what you do. Mm-hmm. And what you end up having is, what is happening there? Congress is shifting the responsibility off to these unelected bodies that are unconstitutional in the first place.
I've heard it described, the delegation of power. Some people think it's no big deal. Hey, we gave, we went to war. We passed a resolution to go to war. No, that wasn't a declaration. Was it 2001? The Congress passed a resolution delegating to the president the power to go to war. That's not the same thing. That way, if the war works out good, the congressman can say, well, it was I voted for this, which allowed the president to make the declaration, essentially. And if it doesn't turn out well, they can say, well, I never authorized that. I just gave it to the president. They don't take full responsibility. And we need to have our Congress people taking responsibility. Absolutely.
And, I would say with the Iraq War, and I think it was 2002, Congressman Ron Paul actually brought up H.R. J112. And in that resolution, he made a motion to vote to declare war, to have Congress do that. And it was unanimously voted down. And, so there was a motion made, and there was a very honorable motion made. And if it had been made, and if Congress would have voted, it would have been, a constitutional war. You could argue also about the actual war, but you couldn't argue that it was constitutional. And then what would happen is we would go out there, we would win it, and then we would get the heck out.
Sure, but that hasn't happened. That hasn't happened since World War II, basically.